was the question that he used to start smearing Joe Biden about Russia and Ukraine. Donald Trump made those other attacks and those other inane comments at other points. But on the question of race, he had nothing.
He had nothing but trying to attack him on Ukraine and then attack him on the 94 crime bill that Joe Biden has said many times, including last night, was a mistake. While he himself, Donald Trump, is advocating things equivalent to the crime bill right now. Rudy Giuliani, who is the architect of stop and frisk, which has been proven to be racist, is his personal lawyer. Donald Trump says we need a national stop and frisk bill. But I think AB raises an excellent point. The question was about a conversation that black parents have to have with their kids. He didn't even remotely show any sensitivity about that kind of conversation, what it does to the parent and what it does to a child to have to be explained to why you're treated differently. It showed his total lack of capacity to even understand the hurt and the feelings that one has to go through to have the conversation. He uses that to say, I've done more for y'all than Abe Lincoln. What does that have to do, even as ludicrous as that is, what does that has to do with you addressing this conversation that black American parents have to have with their kids? And if you don't understand that, if you can't be sensitive to that, you ought not be the president of the United States.
And it's not just black families and black Americans who feel that way. More than 70% of Americans in the most recent polling associate themselves with the goals and aims of Black Lives Matter. AB and Rev, it is so nice to talk to the two of you after a night like last night. Thank you so much for starting us off. When we come back, are the experts and the pundits, people like me, overcorrecting for 2016 and not saying what might be the real reality? It doesn't look so good for Donald Trump.
Would you do another debate?
Yeah, but I don't think there's any reason. I think we're leading in a lot of states that you don't know about. I think we're going to win. And I think if you start looking at what's happening in these states and the votes that are coming in and the amount of votes that are coming in and the great red wave hasn't hit yet. That hits in a few days. It's going to be a great red wave like you've never seen before.
Hidden red wave. With 11 days until Election Day and decidedly behind in the polls, President Trump is banking on what is, based on all the data, a hidden red wave to carry him to an upset win. He actually predicts a landslide for himself. It's that possibility, though, that 2016 will repeat itself in 2020 that's keeping Democrats and some folks in the media up at night. But if the data is right, Democrats and many in the media could be overplaying Trump's odds, as Politico points out in a great new piece of reporting. Any previous campaign in Trump's circumstances, bad polls nationally, behind in multiple must-win states, coming after 4 years of low favorability ratings and steady off-year and midterm losses for the party he leads, would be facing coverage that would be the political equivalent of a hospital vigil for a very sick patient. Let's bring in the reporter of that piece, Daniel Lippman, writes for Politico, wrote that with John Harris. Also joining this conversation, author, historian, and professor, our friend John Meacham. This piece is so smart, but so scary to even read out loud, because I know most of our viewers are living in fear of a repeat of 2016. But it really does make some assumptions that are pretty wacky, that the polling is more wrong than 4 years ago, that no news organizations or polling companies made any adjustments to correct for what happened 4 years ago, and that some event that could shift the dynamics is something that's never happened before, and it's something that's going to happen here in the next 10 days in an election year where almost 50 million people have already voted. Take me through sort of what you report out and where you land in this reporting.
Sure. So I talked to a number of top strategists from previous losing campaigns, presidential campaigns, to test this thesis. And they seem to all agree with me that the media, for both the sake of they want to create some drama, they want to have a real race, and they also are gun shy from 2016. And Democrats, they're happy for the media to say this is a real race because they don't want their voters to not show up to the polls. They want people to stay excited. But what the media is not really counting is that Americans have seen this presidency for almost 4 years. And so previously, the Trump presidency was a theoretical exercise, and people thought it could surprise on the upside. And no one expected a pandemic to cost lives of 220,000 Americans under Donald Trump's watch.
Jon Meacham, what do you think of this theory? And we should just say this is what everybody in media circles and in sort of Democratic political circles is talking about, this anxiety, this whispered, I think Trump's going to do it again. What do you make?
Yeah. I think Daniel and John, both of whom I love, it's a kind of an analog argument, honestly, which is fine. We always fight the last battle. But in a crisis that is, for most of us, existential, that there is a constitutional order at stake, much less the norms, the buoys that mark the channels of our lives. I think that trying to say that Trump is going to lose in an interesting way, not that this should be anyone's concern necessarily, but in an interesting way, it would play into his drama. It would be leading with the chin to some extent, because he's built his political life on grievance. A president who wasn't even born here. Last night he said Biden wasn't from Scranton, in one of the odder swing state illusions. He had this, who knew it would be birthering swing states? But he has this kind of, he needs these enemies. And again, I'm not saying that that's what a media organization's agenda should be. But I, for one, as a citizen, am just as happy to have Biden running scared as opposed to acting as though this was in the bag.
Well, and Daniel, let me just be fair to the piece. You don't report that Donald Trump's going to lose. You report that people covering the race are as adverse to data and information as we often accuse Republicans of being. That's where this felt like something that I also am guilty of. Is that the more important part of the argument?
Yeah, I think it's the media does not want to get this wrong again. And so they'd rather be cautious. They don't want to assume that Biden is going to win when it seems like Trump is a pretty like Harry Houdini. He always slithers out. He's the cat with 9 lives. And so, that's kind of the way the media has played this. And so that's what we report out in the piece.
And so, Meacham, let me just come back to you on the same point, because I think you're right. And I am one of them, which is why this piece felt like a part of my own therapy process here. I am one of them that whispers with Joy and Rachel, like, I don't know. I mean, during the convention, every night, oh, my God, he's going to win again. But I wonder if there's any sort of historical parallel for someone whose political support was undetected in the polls not once but twice.
Twice, I can't think of offhand. The great example of a late-breaking campaign where there was quiet support that manifested itself but then stayed out in the open is Ronald Reagan in 1980. He went into they had their only debate a week out in Cleveland on October 28th of 1980, and Carter was up, I think, by 3 points. And then by that weekend, it broke for a pretty significant Reagan landslide, and the Republicans won the Senate for the first time since the Peloponnesian War. So that was a big moment in 1980. And what that was the country wanted a change, but they weren't sure of Reagan. And Reagan himself said during the Republican convention, they think I'm a combination of the Mad Bomber and Ebenezer Scrooge. But he was reassuring in that moment, and then the numbers broke.
The numbers followed that performance, widely watched, and we don't have any left. But you are both right. Anything can still happen. Daniel Lippman, it's a smart piece of reporting. It's provocative, and I'm glad to have you here to talk about it. Jon Meacham, always a privilege to get to talk to you. Thank you, my friend. Up next, how the line is blurring between voter intimidation and ensuring a secure election. New details about what the Trump campaign is up to in the crucial state of Pennsylvania.
I'm Lindsey Graham, the host of Wondery's show American Scandal. We bring to life some of the biggest controversies in U.S. history. presidential lies, corporate fraud, corruption in sports. In our new series, we look at a decades-long campaign by federal law enforcement to target activists fighting for racial justice. Federal agents went after everyone from Billie Holiday to Martin Luther King Jr. and would ultimately face a public reckoning. Subscribe to American Scandal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Wondery Plus to listen ad-free in the Wondery app.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that.
Donald Trump urging his supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully. Not so subtly raising the idea of using intimidation tactics at voting sites. Well, now it looks like they heard the message, and they have, in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. Members of Trump's campaign acknowledging that they have been videotaping voters in Philadelphia at ballot drop boxes, accusing voters of illegally depositing multiple ballots. But Pennsylvania's AG issued a warning that videotaping voters casting a ballot could amount to illegal voter intimidation. Here he was on MSNBC just a short time ago.
If we determine that their intent is to try and intimidate voters at the polls or voters dropping off their ballots, you can damn well be sure that we're going to shut that down. We will not tolerate voter intimidation here in Pennsylvania.
Joining us now is John Misick, editor-in-chief for the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. First of all, Pennsylvania is the new Florida, right? Ground zero, where both campaigns think the path to the presidency is must win. What is it? What's going on in the state right now?
Sure. Nicole, Pennsylvanians are turning out in their thousands to vote here, dropping off their mail-in ballots. The Secretary of State's office has authorized 2.9 million absentee and mail-in ballot applications. The vast majority of those are going to Democrats, about 1.86 million. And with that footage there, you can see them in Philadelphia standing in line, waiting to drop their ballots in drop boxes. Where I am in Cumberland County, about 15 minutes outside the state capital of Harrisburg, the same scenario is unfolding in the county seat of Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Local editors and reporters usually have a much better handle on the dynamics in a state than cable hosts. What are the dynamics in the state right now?
It's pretty much as advertised. Pennsylvania is very much in play. The Real Clear Politics average has Joe Biden up about 5.1 percentage points over Donald Trump statewide. What's really interesting is if you start going out into the counties that were key to Trump's victory in 2016, Erie County, Northampton County, you see Democrats energized up there like they weren't in 2016. They're fighting to win it this time. In fact, the polling data in Northampton County now shows Joe Biden up 12 points over Donald Trump, a county that Trump carried by 4 points in 2016.
Wow, that's interesting. And it must be that both campaigns are getting the same sort of read. You know, I worked for Republicans who were always behind, but always had this sort of fool's dream that they could carry Pennsylvania. Donald Trump really defied decades of history when he turned it. How did the people that sort of took a chance on him feel that it went?
So, Nicole, if you go up into northeastern Pennsylvania, the proverbial lunchbox voters in Luzerne County, which Trump famously flipped in 2016, you do find some buyer's remorse up there. Luzerne County in the northeast, the unemployment rate is higher than the rest of the state statewide. So they're not seeing the same recovery as they are in Pennsylvania. That's not to say that Trump might not still carry Luzerne. But there are some people who felt that stung, who felt like they were maybe sold a bill of goods 4 years ago, who are reconsidering now.
It's reassuring to hear that some of the things that we talk about we're not wrong about, and it's really interesting to sort of get ahead of the dynamics and the granularity in a state we're going to be talking about. I hope you'll come back and spend some more time with us, John. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Next hour of Deadline White House starts after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
There's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. And your family's hurting badly. If you're making less than, if you're a middle-class family, you're getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires to the ball because we have to wait another month or so. Or are we going to be able to pay the mortgage? Or who's going to tell her she can't go back to community college? They're the decisions you're making in the middle-class families like I grew up in Scranton and Claymont. They're in trouble. We should be talking about your families, but that's the last thing he wants to talk about.
Hi again, everyone. 4 years ago on a presidential debate stage, Donald Trump said Hillary Clinton should be in jail. It capped a weeks-long effort by his campaign to convict and sentence her in the court of public opinion for her use of personal email. The 2020 rerun of that playbook on Joe Biden is largely a flop so far. New York Times describes Trump's failed efforts this way, quote, "The extended back and forth was the most prominent airing so far of the negative message that Mr. Trump clearly sees as his best chance of undermining Mr. Biden in the final days of the presidential campaign. But the clash did not yield the kind of explosive confrontation that strategists on both sides had anticipated and in some cases feared. But it isn't because Trump isn't trying really hard, like harder than he's trying to speak to people's rising fears about the 70,000 new COVID cases yesterday.
We're fighting it, and we're fighting it hard. There is a spike. There was a spike in Florida, and it's now gone. There was a very big spike in Texas. It's now gone. There was a very big spike in Arizona. It's now gone. And there are some spikes and surges in other places. They will soon be gone. It will go away. And as I say, we're rounding the turn. We're rounding the corner. It's going away.
Literally no one thinks we're rounding the corner. But on the Biden smears, Trump was much more detailed, full of supporting so-called data.
You were getting a lot of money from Russia. They were paying you a lot of money, and they probably still are. But now, with what came out today, it's even worse. All of the emails, the horrible emails of the kind of money that you were raking in, you and your family. And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened.
It was part of an elaborate effort that was dealt a possible lethal blow by today's Wall Street Journal, which reported out that records interviewed by the Journal showed no role for Joe Biden in the deal that Trump is trying to draw attention to there. Politico's Ryan Lizza summed up the sideshow, which would have been lost on any viewers not steeped in right-wing media this way. Quote, "One of the hallmarks of the Trump era has been his penchant for pushing fringe characters, peddling dubious stories into the center ring of our political circus. Trump worked overtime to do that again on Thursday, but it did not go particularly well. Trump has alarmed even his own advisors with his lack of focus in the waning days of his campaign. Over the last few days, he has not sustained a coherent argument for himself or against Joe Biden that comes close to the sharp attacks he leveled at every event against Hillary Clinton and on behalf of the forgotten men and women. It seems Donald Trump has forgotten those men and women this year."
I get along very well with Anthony, but he did say, don't wear masks. He did say, as you know, this is not going to be a problem. I think he's a Democrat, but that's okay. We have plenty of money. In fact, we beat Hillary Clinton with a tiny fraction of the money that she was able to. Right, take a look at what's happening with your friend in Michigan, where her husband's the only one allowed to do anything. His vice president, I mean, she is more liberal than Bernie Sanders and wants it even more. Bernie Sanders wants it. The Democrats want it.
Very confused guy. He thinks he's running against somebody else.
Did you follow that? I didn't. The Trump fog machine is where we start this hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Congresswoman and Washington Post contributing columnist Donna Edwards is back. Also with us, John Heilman, executive editor of The Recount and co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus. And our friend Jason Johnson's back, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University and contributor to The Grio. Lucky for us, Donna, John, and Jason, all MSNBC political analysts. So, John Heilman, it is our job to keep sort of like a little side eye on Fox News. And I consider I try to read the New York Post. I try to watch what information or disinformation is being pushed through that ecosystem. I could not follow all of the attacks that Donald Trump was trying to launch at Joe Biden yesterday. What did you make of the effort? And is there any more explaining we should do to anyone that doesn't have it as an occupational hazard to keep an eye on these attempts at creating stories in the right-wing media?
Hi, Nicole. Happy Friday.
Hi.
Good to be Friday. With you. Always. I know, right? It's been one of those weeks.
Another 17-day week.
You may recall You may recall that the last time we met, we were discussing this very story. And I believe I said the phrase radioactive turd on several occasions in relation to this story. I won't repeat that, except for having just repeated it. But it's still a radioactive turd. It's more of a turd than ever, and it's more radioactive than ever. And here's the thing, Nicole. You said you couldn't follow it because you looked in Fox News and you read the New York Post stories, and you can't follow it. You know who else can't follow it? Donald Trump can't follow it, because if you listen to him last night, you think about all of the effort they put into this. Like, this is going to be it. This is the Comey revelation that's going to change everything. I had Steve Bannon a few weeks ago say to me, we got a big October surprise coming. Rudy and I are going to roll it out. It's going to change everything. And now this thing comes out, and there's only one place that'll take it, and it's the New York Post. It's so stinky that Fox News won't even run it when they tried to peddle it initially. Now it's here. They bring this guy to the debate yesterday, who's supposedly like the killer fact witness, who's gonna say these emails are true, these text messages are true. It's just like the 2016 debate when Bannon brought Bill Clinton's accusers with him to St. Louis. So that was all supposed to be a big setup for Donald Trump to go in the debate and tear Joe Biden limb from limb on this thing. It's going to prove that Joe Biden's a crook and a criminal. And I watched him last night, and I realized that I understood the story better than Trump did. I mean, he could not make a case. He was just gibbering on stage, and there was literally no one who wasn't already deeply immersed in this radioactive turd that could have made hide your hair of what he was saying on stage last night. It's a sort of complicated, convoluted thing, and the problem for Trump is that he doesn't do any debate prep, so it's not like he can land a clean hit without just speaking Fox News-ese, right? So for any normal voter watching last night, all they get a sense is like, what's he talking about? Money? I don't know what he's talking about. It makes no sense. So I think, the combination of how badly it went in the debate for him last night because he didn't execute on it, and the fact that there's really nothing there, and the fact that the Wall Street Journal, as you pointed out, sort of drove a stake through the heart of it this morning, I don't think it's going to cause Joe Biden any problems. Does that mean Donald Trump's not going to talk about it some more? I am certain he and his henchmen and his acolytes and his associates are going to talk about it for the next 11 days. But I don't think it's going to matter very much because it does not affect the real lives of real people in America.
Donna Edwards, that's the part of it that's so interesting to me. It also reveals how far apart the polarized media chambers are, in that when I worked in a White House, Fox News sometimes had the most favorable take, or the most, in our view, in a Bush White House, the most balanced take on the story of the day. CNN, by and large, tried to play it straight, and Keith Olbermann would call us the dumbest and worst people in the world night after night. But they covered the same story. They started in the same place, by and large. One of the sort of, blessings of Fox News being an arm of the state under Donald Trump's presidency is that they bolster his feelings. One of the dangers is they only talk to each other. And it would seem that the debate stage was the very last place that Donald Trump would have in the next 11 days to talk to anyone outside that chamber he's already got. He's got the Trump viewer. They are in. That is the Trump voter. Those are the people at his rallies. Those are the people taking hydroxychloroquine. Hopefully they're not injecting bleach into their lungs. But those are not the people you're talking to on a debate stage. What do you make of the strategic blunder? I think John perfectly encapsulated the failure to execute.
Well, this has been, Nicole, the entire campaign, and frankly, his entire presidency, where he's only talking to this very sort of captured and already there crowd. I mean, I was with a group of, 6 women, and when Donald Trump started doing all of that, all of us had to pull out our devices and look it up.
Google it, right.
And even then, we didn't understand why this was relevant. And part of it is because we know, as Joe Biden said, we know him, we know his character. We don't think he's corrupt. And no matter how much Donald Trump tries to throw all of that stuff on him, all it does is Joe Biden acting like a fan and blowing it all back on to Donald Trump. And after all, it's only Donald Trump who has a secret bank account in China, not Joe Biden.
That's a great point. I mean, Jason, just pick up on Donna's point about projection. I mean, I thought this was so interesting last night for all that it revealed that Donald Trump and the people around Donald Trump don't understand about campaigns. I mean, he won, and that's not nothing 4 years ago, but he didn't do it because he had a good campaign. He didn't do it because Jared Kushner became a good political mind. He didn't, and he's not. And last night's debate performance was evidence of that. And I want to read you some of the coverage because we know that Donald Trump lives and dies by the reviews. This is what the Washington Post wrote about it. During the final presidential debate, President Trump made reference to the laptop from hell, AOC +3. I had to Google that one, Donna. Russia, Russia, Russia. Yes, said 3 times in a row. The material was very familiar to, and maybe only familiar to, regular viewers of Fox News opinion hosts such as Sean Hannity. The president borrowed from Hannity's nightly themes and even copied the same phrases the opinion host uses on his daily radio and TV shows. Trump accused Biden of hiding in his basement, something Hannity viewers hear on a very regular basis, even as the former vice president has made more and more in-person campaign stops over the past few weeks. The presidency as a radio show doesn't work. I mean, you've got Hannity, and you've got Hannity rowing in your direction. The presidency is supposed to be something different, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's, Nicole, that's always been Donald Trump's problem, right? When it has to go beyond performance and then into substance, he's got a problem. Every single thing that he says only works if you're sort of a mean, venal, angry person. I mean, Joe Biden is hiding. Well, you're supposed to shelter in place during coronavirus. That's kind of like saying, look at that nerdy kid wearing a helmet and a seatbelt. Like, okay, does that make you tough? The kid is supposed to be wearing a helmet and a seatbelt. When he went on and on and on attacking Joe Biden's family, I was watching with some friends who actually are not doing this every day the whole time. And the reaction pretty consistently is this. So wait a minute. Joe Biden's been in office for 47 years, and the only dirt you can find on him is stuff that his kid did? I mean, like, none of this actually sticks to Joe Biden himself. And when Donald Trump, without the power of being able to interrupt and just do bombast over and over again, he failed to do the single most important thing that he had to do in a debate, which is make the case for why he should keep the job. And all he could do is say reasons why you shouldn't give it to the other guy. And if those weren't convincing, he didn't convince anybody of anything. It was an absolute disaster and failure. He probably shouldn't have skipped out on the second one because then he might have had some practice.
I think that the fact that even Joe Biden is leaning into this and remaining on offense in the sort of face of attacks against his son, which John Heilemann, you know probably better than me, considerations about the impact on his family was the last gate that he had to get through. He and Jill had to get through when they decided whether or not to do this, I think a couple years ago. Let me show you Joe Biden saying, you want to judge my character? Go ahead, judge my character.
What's happening here is you know who I am. You know who he is. You know his character. You know my character. You know our reputations for honor and telling the truth. I am anxious to have this race. I am anxious to see this take place. The character of the country is on the ballot. Our character is on the ballot. Look at us closely.
Doesn't sound like anybody worried about a character fight.
No, not worried about a character fight, Nicole. And you know, the couple things to say about this. The first is just to go back to what you said a second ago. You know, in 2016, there were a lot of reasons why Joe Biden didn't run. He was obviously still shattered over the death of his older son, Beau, but he also knew that there were stories that would be like these stories that would come out about his other son's troubled personal life, genuinely troubled. And he felt as though he needed to not put the family through that, coming so closely on the death of Beau. And so it was a big factor in why he didn't run in 2016. And when they came up to contemplating running in 2020, there was a lot of discussion. They knew, again, they were very familiar with the troubles that Hunter has had in his life. And there was a family decision made to go forward into this race, knowing that at one point or another, we would end up here. So the least surprised person in America that Donald Trump has taken this to this place is Joe Biden. So he's ready for this. He's not happy about it. It upsets him, it angers him, it hurts him, but he's ready for it. And I'll say the other thing here is, you know, this is something you and I both know, Nicole, because, you know, and Donna knows and Jason knows too. You go through a hard campaign. almost no one comes through a campaign with higher net favorables than they started out with. The story of politics, especially at the national level, is you start in a pretty good place and then you take a lot of incoming, tens of millions of dollars worth of ads, negative free media, scandals, and then you get to the end and you limp across the finish line. You're lucky if you're in a net positive place, more positive than negative, right? Joe Biden has come out of this campaign seeing his favorables rise over the course of the last 6 months. Right. Donald Trump has tried to attack him from every possible angle, has spent $1 billion on mostly negative media. None of it has stuck to Joe Biden. And not only has none of it stuck, but Joe Biden is viewed more favorably by the country today than he was on the day that he won the Democratic nomination. I think it is unprecedented in my lifetime covering politics to see that. And that's another reason why Joe Biden isn't backing down from this fight, because he knows people have judged his character and judged it in a positive way.
It is such a smart point. And Donna, I mean, this is the structural part of campaigns, right? When you're a staffer, you think you can just engineer everything, like an October surprise, which actually the ones that work are never engineered, ever. So the idea that they're trying so hard is their first mistake. But this idea of the human beings behind the politics is something that Joe Biden always led us into. So when the human beings who became political fodder became the story for Trump or the target, we already knew. They'd been open. We already knew. And I said this before. I think I said this to Jason. The only person that I've ever seen in American public life, in politics or entertainment or news, to have their hacked material tell us something better than we know from their teleprompter speeches might be Joe Biden, whose messages to his son, my beautiful boy, get better. And I think in the emails that we saw, or the text that we saw, Hunter Biden